Stay tuned to find out how you can fly this tiny drone, the DJI Neo, without visual line of sight, perfectly legally here in the UK. The DJI Neo is a tiny 135-gram drone that can be launched from the palm of your hand and will often not fly more than a few feet away from the user. So you would be taking a fair view if you thought it wouldn't be covered by many rules here in the UK. Well, that debate is really another debate for another time, and whether or not this should fall within the regulations is another video. Today, we're going to explain what the rules are to ensure you do not fall foul of them and find yourself in trouble. The average user of the DJI Neo is not always likely to have a lot of drone use experience, so I tried my absolute best to keep things as simple as possible and jargon-free today. To deeper dive the UK rules, there is a playlist linked in the description. It is our UK drone guide series and gives you everything you need to know about flying in the open category in the UK. Before we get into it, let me be a YouTuber for just a minute and mention that if you're new here and want more content related to drones, including more videos coming up on the DJI Neo, then subscribe. Also, could my awesome regulars keep up their amazing work in hitting the like nice and early? It helps and it makes me smile. First up, and drone registration. The Neo has a complex camera capable of recording images and footage, so you do need to register the drone on the CAA website. You can only register on the official site, and of the two sections of the CAA drone and model aircraft registration and education scheme, or DMARES for short, it is the operator ID that you as a Neo owner must have. It's just over £10 a year, and you need to show that number on the drone. Now, this is a tiny drone, so space is a little bit restricted. But one tip here is to place the number on a piece of sticky paper inside the battery compartment. The rules allow you to place it anywhere on the drone body where a police officer, etc., can view it without requiring tools to access it. The flyer ID is not required for this drone at the moment, although that is expected to change. The education part and test are free, all within the CAA registration site, and as you are required to follow the rules you learn about, I would highly recommend taking it. If nothing else, it shows others that you have the knowledge. So that is you registered, and as a side note, you can use that same operator ID on any other drone that you then purchase and that you own. You do not need a new one each time. Pretty handy. One other requirement of sub 250-gram drones you'll need to be aware of is that you are required to have read the manual. It sounds basic, doesn't it? But so many of us open up new tech and just have a play. So here, authorities are trying to ensure that you know the drone before you operate it. Useful especially if your first flights will be around people and you need to be able to get that drone back quickly. Next up, we have one of the most important areas of regulation surrounding the tiny DJI Neo, and that is airspace. As far as the law is concerned, your Neo is flying in shared airspace where other drones, manned aircraft and emergency helicopters will be operating. So you need to ensure you follow some basic rules and checks before you fly. If you look at those people getting in trouble for flying their drone, getting fined in court, etc., they're more than likely flying in the wrong place is actually what got them in trouble in the first place. In fact, here in the UK, we will soon have fixed penalties for drone use as well. So we need to get our heads around these basics to ensure that we do not get fined. Think of drone airspace in terms of two sections: what's happening on the ground and then airspace clearance. Flying in the UK as a recreational drone pilot, you'll be flying in what is called the open category. This is actually more about where you are flying in terms of the ground, so town centre or countryside, etc., and how close to uninvolved people you can get. There are three subcategories within the open category. I'm not going to explain them all here, as you can get that in our other videos, and there is no real reason that you need to know as a Neo flyer who will be spending all of their time flying in the A1 subcategory. So let's get to that now. If you want to fly in town centres or even over uninvolved people, which is basically the A1 airspace, then a DJI Neo drone will allow you to do that without any extra certification whatsoever. So you're able to fly in town centres or congested areas, as the regulator likes to call them. As mentioned, you can fly over people, but you need to avoid groups or crowds of people. There is zero required separation to uninvolved people as well. Basically, the advice here is to avoid any situation where someone cannot move out of the way easily. The CAA have a list of suggested locations that they recommend to avoid, but for me, you could even include people sat enjoying a picnic at a park, etc. They're sat. Really, you just need to be able to be sensible and safe here. Try to plan your flights accordingly to avoid people wherever possible, but certainly avoiding groups of people. This is one of the areas I think Neo flyers will possibly get caught on, as it would certainly include events like music festivals or sporting events where, in fact, there's usually or quite often a flight restriction or a ground takeoff restriction that prevents you from flying any drones in those kinds of events. So please do check it out before you fly. Remember, it won't matter about whether the rules are fair to include such a small drone when you are stood in court or the police are seizing your equipment. You need to ensure you operate within these parameters safely. So run a mental risk assessment of the location and make sure you feel a drone flight is even safe or 100% appropriate. When flying a drone, it is you who are accountable to do so responsibly. You could be flying within the rules and still be deemed as operating unsafely. So think about the flight before takeoff, especially when close to people. Planning is everything. Assess the area of your flight and try to preempt any issues which might come up. You're going to be flying this little drone, this tiny drone, around people a lot, and you need to consider Article 241 of the Air Navigation Order, which states a person must not recklessly or negligently cause or permit an aircraft to endanger any person or property. So keep in mind that you need to act responsibly at all times. This is an article often forgotten, and it's a bit of a catch-all. You might not see your little Neo as an aircraft, but under the law, it really is. There is a little folklore surrounding very small drones in the UK and a belief that they can be flown pretty much anywhere. But that isn't true. In airspace terms, they all have to follow the same rules as even the larger drones. You still need to carry out all the checks to make sure that you are clear to fly. This includes things like avoiding airport exclusion zones and checking whether or not there are any other temporary or permanent restrictions to the airspace. This could be in place for a number of safety reasons, and flying your drone into one is a very serious issue that you can expect a swift response from authorities over. My top tip here is to download an app called Drone Assist, which will give you all sorts of information, including whether or not there are any restrictions at a glance. We have a video taking you through how to use the app, which I will link to in the description. And remember, using this app is completely free of charge in terms of being able to check airspace and that type of thing. You don't even need to sign in to get all of the essential information. Lots of other levels to it, but that other video will explain it. I really cannot stress enough how important it is to get the airspace clearance right. Thanks to apps and services like Drone Assist and Drone Scene, it is easier than ever before to quickly check that your flight is legal. Flying in a restricted area will get you in serious trouble and could threaten the safety of other flights and events. Next up, and we need to talk about visual line of sight. In the UK, the law is clear that you need to keep your drone close enough that you're able to avoid collision either in the air or on the ground. In our UK Drone Guide series, mentioning that again, we have a video looking at this closely, explaining what I call my traffic light system. But with such a small drone, you will not be able to fly this too far away from you legally. There are lots of ways authorities can prove your flight was illegal, so please do keep that in mind. Next, we have a cool exemption for drones using the Follow Me mode, which of course will cover so many of the flights that people will be taking with the DJI Neo. Point 35 of the drone code allows anyone flying with Follow Me mode active to fly within 50 meters without line of sight. That is very useful for a lifestyle drone like the Neo. You must still follow all of the other points of the legislation, but you can have it flying behind you or orbiting, etc., whilst you're walking or doing something else. You need to be ready and capable to take over that drone again very quickly should anything happen. So this isn't a case of having it 50 meters away and driving off or just carrying on with your day, etc., and hoping it's there. You need to make sure that it's still tracking you, that it's safe and all of that stuff. Pretty handy exemption though for this little drone in particular. The next part of the UK drone rules for these little sub 250 gram drones, actually sub 140 gram drone in this case, and that's how high you can fly this drone. It is 120 meters or 400 feet. I know it triggers me too, the fact that 120 meters isn't actually 400 feet. But enough of that for now. The same is true with the height of your drone flight as with VLOS. Nobody's waiting over your shoulder to imprison you should you go a foot or two out of that. And frankly, you will find that it is unlikely you'll spend too much time at full height anyway. And with a DJI Neo, especially due to winds and keeping closer to your subject matter, you'll also struggle to see it at that height as well. Keep in mind that this height is from the closest part of the Earth's surface. So remember that if you're flying in hilly areas and that type of thing. Okay, are you still with me? Well done. Do not feel overwhelmed by all of this. Once you get your head around the basics, it does become second nature. And a lot of these rules are common sense. The single most important is airspace and ensuring that you are clear to fly. Nobody wants to get in trouble for an air ambulance diverting because of a 135-gram drone flight, do they? When flying your drone, keep a keen ear and eye out for emergency service helicopters, such as air ambulances. They will approach quickly and will have to halt their flight or take evasive action to avoid your drone, which nobody wants. If this does happen, firstly, hover your drone in place and assess what action should be taken. Often it will include dropping height or landing where the drone is. If you're flying in an automated mode with the Neo, then allow that an automated mode to finish. But for instance, if it's on follow me, that type of thing, do approach the drone to be able to snatch it out of the air. Worst case scenario, if you just grab this thing out of the air and turn it sideways, the motors will automatically, as a safety function, switch off. Isn't the ideal way to land it all the time, but if you need this thing out of the air quickly, that's the way to do it. But certainly hover first and assess. Don't let the weather catch you and your DJI Neo out either. Remember, it is not rated to fly in anything other than dry conditions. So be aware that fog, mist or rain could cause the drone to fail or act erratically. With cheap consumer drones, you are playing a lottery in terms of moisture ingress and whether or not it might cause an issue. Those issues might not even happen straight away, with the moisture causing issues over time. Don't fly your consumer rated drones in the rain unless you want issues. Takeoff and landing is a hot topic in the UK at the moment, but keeping it simple, ensure you have checked that there are no bylaws in place at the location that you are flying. This is usually shown on a sign in the corner of the park or field that you're flying in. There are also SSSIs to factor in as well. These are vital locations where wildlife, birds and even seals, etc. are protected, and you should be very careful when assessing if you should fly here. SSSIs are now shown on Drone Assist as yellow areas, so keep an eye out for them and click to read the restrictions and go through the links to actually find out what is there. Now also, of course, what part of the year that the restrictions are aimed for. With a tiny DJI Neo, you'll need to be careful as any weather change can have a big impact. Wind in particular will change how the drone operates, and you could find it flying away. On that note, keep in mind that when the wind starts to hit this, the profile, it really sees this as a flat surface, rather than obviously with other drones where they have the little legs sticking out, etc. That kind of breaks up the wind. So when heavy wind hits this, not only is it 135 grams with small motors, but those motors are pushing through these prop guards. So some of the power, a decent amount of the power is lost there. So when a good gust or wind hits this, it will carry it away. So just be aware of that. If you're flying the Neo with goggles on, legally you required a spotter. That means someone stood next to you, keeping an eye on the drone and letting you know if there are any issues, such as people approaching or aircraft, etc. They can only use their eyes and not binoculars, etc. Again, they must be stood right next to you, and you need to keep the drone within their visual line of sight. As mentioned at the start, this is the basics you need to know when flying your DJI Neo outside, and I highly recommend over time that you watch our UK Drone Rules series linked in the description. Although this might seem like a toy, and I personally think we should see some changes in regulations around something that's quite this small and light. Remember that legally it is still an aircraft and sharing the airspace with other users. So we must take responsibility and fly safely. Any questions, let me know in the comments below, or of course you can email me. Sean out.